inputs regarding underlying challenges as well as the enabling measures that can facilitate the local manufacturing in electric cooking device manufacturing sector to meet domestic and also pave the way for export oriented growth. The discussion would be centered around understanding the supply chain challenges and specific components of clean cooking devices design, manufacturing capabilities that could be easily scaled up locally, current challenges of standards, policy, and how same can be enabled, and lastly, the tariff related issues. I would now request the International Liaison Manager for MEX program in India, Dr. Nick Russo, to take over and invite our panelists for today's session to kickstart the discussion.
Thank you, Sheetal. So good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I think this should be a really interesting session. I've just come back from a week in India, which included a visit to a significant factory making induction stoves. India is definitely becoming a major source of clean cooking solutions, both through its innovation and through its manufacturing supply chain development. And the Indian government's putting a lot of policy effort into that. So that's really encouraging. China continues to be a major player, and it's important for us all to kind of consider how India and China can sit alongside each other. So what we've got in today's panel is three speakers who have themselves each their own experience of building a supply chain for a product that they are developing in the clean cooking space. Three quite interesting and contrasting devices, and I'm sure they've got their own distinct stories. So I'm keen to hear from each of them the practical progress they've made, the challenges they find, and in particular where interventions might help. We're currently working on building a policy guidance for the government of India to support the growth of this sector. So we're very open to suggestions for that, but also just ways in which the different players can be brought together and maybe support for transparency and sharing of information. And then the fourth speaker, who's not able to join us in person because it's the Chinese Spring Festival and she is hopefully with her family enjoying some good break, is Nancy Liu, and she runs China Impact Sourcing, and she'll be able to share some of her perspectives about the opportunities to source components from China. So without further ado, I will invite our three speakers to speak. So we've got four speakers and we've got 40 minutes. So I'm going to ask each to limit yourself to under 10 minutes so that we can have some good discussion at the end. If those of you who are listening would like to pose any questions to the speakers or make any suggestions or even just introduce yourselves and say, hey, I'm here, connect with me, then do put that in the chat. And I'll try to keep an eye on that and we can build those questions and comments into the discussion. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm very pleased to start with introducing Dr. Umesh Srivastava, who is the Chief General Manager at the Indian Oil Corporation Limited. He's got degrees in mechanical engineering and a PhD in energy studies at IIT Delhi. Hi there, Dr. Srivastava. He's over 31 years of R&D experience in the Indian Oil Corporation, and he currently leads the Alternate Energy Department, where there is amongst a number of areas, a focus on solar energy research. And they have developed with his team the Surya Nutan solar-powered cooking device that has been attracting a lot of interest in a number of levels. I saw it was mentioned at the recent IRENA conference. And I think part of the story that you've got for us is about your challenge in finding the components to enable you to drive down the cost of the device to make them affordable for consumers. But I won't steal your thunder. Hand over to you and I invite you to take the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, and my greetings of the day to all who have joined in this webinar, and thanks to Vimal and Sheetal for making me part of this webinar. As Nick has already introduced, apart from wearing the various hats that I wear in my center, solar is one aspect which we look into, and there also, we being a market-driven company, we are more interested in development of products that can have some societal value, and of course, clean cooking is a very high on our agenda. So we developed this solar cooking system, Surya Nutan, and it was developed and unveiled in the March of 2022. And ever since then, we have put about 50 different products in the various geographical locations of the country, giving it to some of the identified users and gathering the product performance feedback as well as the cooking ability of that product. So one thing that I can say with pride is that our product has been able to fulfill most of the cooking needs, right from the roti, which is supposed to be a very difficult thing to be done on solar cooking, to some non-veg dishes, and uh, some baking items also have been done unattended by the users. During the course of this whole pilot study that we did, we also fine-tuned the product, and that was the main purpose of doing so. We found that our product is kind of we've coined a new term in the name of thermal battery. So what it does is the solar panels on the rooftop generates electricity. The electricity, it comes to the product, gets converted into heat, and then we are storing heat inside the product. Whenever and wherever we want to use that heat, we are using it for cooking, which means that our product involves a lot of insulation material, some electronics, and of course, the other things are mechanical items. And when we talk of mass propagation, we are finding it really so far as insulation is concerned. Let me speak about insulation first. Insulation is one of the most, I would say, ignored topic in engineering studies so far as the Indian colleges are concerned, because not much of literature itself is available on the insulation materials. And we found that they have a very limited usage for a domestic application. Insulations are used a lot in the industrial applications, but for the domestic application, the insulation material has to have a very different characteristic, which we found very difficult to source from either India or abroad. After that comes uh, the electronics. We all know that electronics is something which is facing a tough time, not only in my product, but it is there in any other product, right from the automobiles to the white goods. Wherever electronic card is used, the components are not sourced from, not available in the country, so they come from abroad. And there is a price rise, there is a scarcity because of the war, because of many other reasons. We faced a bit of a problem there. And uh, then coming to, even because Indian Oil is not going to manufacture or assemble or market these products themselves, it has to be done through our empanel vendors. So when we've floated this expression of interest for asking the vendors to come to us, because it being a new product, not many vendors were very willing to burn their hands into this kind of production capacities. And we are just waiting for time to pass so that the product gets more and more stabilized and people become aware of it. And then slowly and steadily, we feel that there'll be more vendors. And as the product comes into the market, there'll be more component manufacturers, more users of the product, and the technological advancements in the components will also take place. So this is what I think I have to say as of now.
Right, thank you. So yes, it's an interesting time for the sector because you are developing products which would benefit from economies of scale, but the market is still to be proven. So we're certainly working on that demand side stimulation I think there's some exciting projects coming down the pipeline, and I know the Ministry of Rural Affairs is very keen to work with you to make your product available in rural areas of India.
Yeah.
Okay, and you've identified a number of particular areas where sourcing components is a challenge. You mentioned insulation, electronics. I'd be interested to hear how other people approach that. Okay, so our next speaker is Mr. Siddharth Mayur. He is he there on the line? I just want to make sure he's available. He's a first-generation social entrepreneur with a mission to bring about energy security and energy independence to the masses using renewable and clean energy power generation and storage technologies. He's a founder of a number of companies operating in this kind of clean energy space, including H2E power systems, but also Annapurna MPEP, which is a multi-utility clean cooking solution. And the last time that I was able to visit India with Simon Batchelor, we had a demonstration of this device. Again, a very impressive and interesting design, and taking on the challenge, as Dr. Srivastava said, of cooking rotis, amongst other things. Is Mr. Mayur on the line? Could he make himself visible and we can invite him to speak?
Nick, we have Mr. Dada Sahib from his office, but I think Siddharth is having some issues logging in. He's mentioning that he's joined, but we are not able to see him. So I would suggest we continue with Ben and we'll come back to Siddharth.
That's fine, of course. I'm sure Ben will be happy to take the next slot. Okay, so Ben Jeffries is CEO of ATEC International, which is a very strong player in the Pago clean cooking sector. As ATEC's CEO and strategic leader, Ben has an unwavering commitment to unlocking potential in others. Ben brings over 14 years' experience in managing teams across social enterprise, international development, and corporate sectors. Ben, with ATEC, moved to Cambodia in 2015, and they're now also expanded into Bangladesh. And they're rolling out a second patented Pago cooking product range, branded eCook, and has been working towards solving clean cooking for the bottom of the pyramid, using some very innovative technology. Ben, what have you got to tell us about your experiences of working with component suppliers and building a supply chain for your product?
Great, thanks Nick, and thanks everyone for allowing me the opportunity to come talk. I'll just very quickly talk about ATEC and what we do, and then I'll talk specifically to our expansion plans and supply chain sort of demands that we're seeing around that. So I'll just share my screen quickly. Hopefully this is going to come up the right way. All right, fingers crossed everyone can see that okay. So I'm just going to leave it in this view, but let me know if anyone's having trouble seeing it. So ATEC
looks good.
Thanks, Nick. Specifically going to be talking about our eCook product range. I'm sure as people on this call are probably aware, decarbonising cooking will benefit half the planet as far as moving people away from cooking with wood and other biomass, but it also reduced 2% of global emissions at the same time. That's actually more than the global airline industry. And that's very much what ATEC is working towards, to try and solve this significant social and environmental problem that has immense benefit across both those areas as well, using technology to solve that. As Nick mentioned, we started in Cambodia in 2016. We are an Australian registered company. And then in 2018, we also opened up a subsidiary in Bangladesh. So we actually have teams, about 60 staff across 4 countries, mainly in Cambodia and Bangladesh, bringing that product to market. But we're now in the process, particularly with eCook, which I'll talk to in a second, of being able to really, what we see our value add is around sort of working with local distributors within multiple markets across South Asia, Southeast Asia and Africa, to bring these products to market, and ATEC focusing specifically on the technology side of the product and the integration with carbon credits. And that's very much what we see as a great opportunity within the cook stove sector. I think India presents the largest market in the world. Well, it definitely does represent the largest market in the world, not just for solving the cooking problem, but also on the carbon credit side as well, if it's done correctly too. And so ATEC's eCook product, which you can see here, one of our customers in Bangladesh holding, is a IoT integrated solution that is not just the sort of hardware front end of a stove, but then also has the software and data backends to those stoves, and that all comes together through an integrated SIM card into the stove that gives that direct data access. That opens up payment solutions, as Nick mentioned, around pay-as-you-go, so customers can buy the stove and pay it off in small monthly payments. And then more importantly, for us, is the ability to be able to collect that data and then use that data to directly generate and validate carbon credits. And for us, that's really the significant opportunity I think we see ahead of us to really take things to scale and look at how we take the markets in a different direction, is being able to very much bring electric cooking to the forefront of the carbon credit markets. It has some unique advantages around electricity already being available and being able to be utilizing that and modern IoT technologies to generate the very significant carbon credit opportunity that exists with electric cooking. Even in a market like India, which has one of the highest rates of coal power generation in the world, with high efficiency cooking solutions, you can still look to have a significant greenhouse gas reduction. But as we've seen in articles in The Guardian this week, you need to not just be able to put the technology in place, but be able to accurately verify that the carbon credits are actually being generated. And that's very much the field we're working in. Now for us, if I can move the little bar, hopefully I can. Yep, there we go. I just wanted to show here. So for example, this is the dashboard of a live dashboard of all our stoves currently around the world. As you can see, our main markets here in Cambodia and Bangladesh, where we have our own distribution and teams in place, but we've already got some units into Nepal, Kenya, Rwanda and Zambia. And for us, we're very much looking at really where the majority of opportunity is, which is in South Asia. If you look at purely at the numbers of where the majority of people are still cooking with wood are, it's within this part of the world that we think has an immense opportunity for us to be able to move forward. And for us, the one challenge we see within this area in particular is most of our manufacturing is done out of China currently, but a lot of these areas, the import tariffs and trade protection policies in this region actually make it quite difficult to be able to bring product into these areas. So for us, we're looking at who can we partner with and work with, particularly in these areas, to actually bring this product to market, looking at not just distribution, but then also in-country assembly and potentially in-country sourcing, depending on quality as well. So that's very much the process we're going through now, looking at Bangladesh, India and Pakistan, and potentially Nepal as well, in particular, of how can we get the product into market into these areas in a way that's cost effective, that delivers both a sort of a good economic opportunity, social and carbon credit opportunity as well. That's it for me. Thanks, Nick.
Great, thank you.
Cool.
And I think your both of the speakers have alluded to the both sort of parts of the supply chain, both the upstream kind of getting the components and sourcing the elements and the raw materials that make up your product, but also the route to the market and the supply chain there, working through partners. And these things all, the more partners there are, the more costs and margins get added along the way. And the challenge is often to try to keep costs down. I think what's interesting with ATEC, obviously, is their pay-go model means that a device which does have a level of sophistication and kind of upfront cost, if you were buying it as a single item, can be managed better and made much more affordable by spreading the cost. I think business models are an important part of the answer here. Okay, I understand the speaker, Mr. Mayur, is now available, and I want to welcome him. So, as I said earlier, he's a serial entrepreneur with a number of companies that he's founded, and the one that's most relevant to this session is Annapurna MPP, which is a multi-utility clean cooking solution. So I'll invite Mr. Mayur to talk about his experience of sourcing components and building a supply chain. Hi there.
Thank you, Nick. And my apologies for being late. I have been in transit. Actually, I've just reached a place in Himachal Pradesh. So we have some project meeting here. So I'm right in the middle of the hills here, and we actually faced zero electricity yesterday, and that's when we thought about why couldn't we have a cooking solution. We were talking to this company that I'm visiting, but nevertheless, I will jump into the topic that we are discussing here today. The component manufacturing. Now, if you're talking clean cooking, there are a lot of different innovations that are happening in the country. One that we are working on with Annapurna is based on the battery technology, which is a salt-based battery, high temperature battery, which is giving us a multi-purpose kind of a effect where we are able to provide for cooking as well as for backup power for a typical single family home. And the beauty of this technology is it is scalable, so we can even expand it to a multi-family home or to a community cooking and so on and so forth. One of the key things that or the challenges that we have faced while undergoing this development is that a lot of technology is available, but a lot of technology is available in Europe. So bringing it to India and also paying the customs duty, the transportation, it ends up becoming very, very expensive. And if you're talking about cooking, whether it is a rich man's home or a poor man's home, you tend to be very, very cost sensitive. In anybody's house, you would find a lot of fancy things, but you will never find a very fancy cooking system. Okay, the cooking system is kind of standard that goes everywhere. So price, therefore, is a very key factor to doing whatever we are trying to do. And across stream, I mean, I have studied different cooking technologies, different cooking methodologies. A lot of components that get into it, especially the electronics or the micro power electronics, as I call it, as far as Annapurna is concerned, and I'm sure that's the same for other cooking devices as well. In our case, we are talking about heat exchangers. We are talking about micro heaters that couple the heat that comes out of the batteries. You're talking about the end plate that you need to get to the temperatures for puffing the roti. And all of these components, if we are able to put together an ecosystem, and like we are trying to do with our other businesses, electrolyzer, for instance, if we make a list of the balance, the bill of material, and then we take the critical parts of the bill of material and the non-critical parts, and try to develop that entire ecosystem within India. In my case, we are trying to build it within a 200-kilometer periphery from where we are. The bigger challenges that people face is the vendors or the ancillary manufacturers. Unless they have enough business, nobody would invest into this process. So when I go to people and I tell them that I have to make a prototype, I have to make 20 cooking devices, and then we go to 200, then we go 2000, but then his ROI will only happen if you give him an order for 20,000. Now, for me to reach 20,000, there is a big behavioral change. There is a big policy push. There are multiple things that have to come into play for me to reach 20,000. So what we've been telling to the government also is that how can we incentivize this particular category where we have a specific PLI scheme for component manufacturing. Whether it is a small heat exchanger. Now, there are some components. I'll again go to the example of Annapurna. There is one component we are using in dollar terms, it would be about $70. But in terms of lead time, it is about 30-35 week lead time to procure that component. Why? Because there are less than 3 suppliers in the world who have reached up to the quality or who have a certified CE certified or a UL certified module. whether they are wanting to expand. Yes, they want to expand, but then they will expand organically. They will not expand, exponentially. And therefore, when I have to buy components from them, I have to pay a very heavy price, and that's how my price of the end product becomes very high. So if we can have a PLI kind of a scheme, and if through the dialogues that we have, for example, the dialogue for today, we can reach out to the government, and with the new hydrogen mission has come out. There are a lot of initiatives coming out from the DST, from MNRE, from different PSUs also on cooking. See, cooking is a very favorite activity. If you go to any PSU, they will have a startup program, and they would always want the cooking thing to be there, because that's like the the tick mark. That's the box they have to tick mark to go to the government and say that we're doing something for the rural population, or something for indoor air pollution, and so on and so forth. But then that project ends there. That project does not get into developing of the ecosystem. And therefore, for India as a country, is what I personally believe, is that if we can focus on 2 or maybe 3 processes for cooking. I mean, not saying that the other processes are not good, or are not effective for India, but if the country can choose that, say, these are the 3 methods that we are going to get into, and then we do a vertical and a horizontal relay on these products. What are the components required? What are the services required? What is the kind of tooling that is required? Whether this particular technology or this particular process has all the components that are available in India. So material, for example, when we chose the battery, we chose the salt battery and not lithium, because the material is available in India. So we also have to go back to the drawing board and get into the powder chemistry of things, that whether the material is, whether I'm importing that material or whether I'm procuring the material here. So the idea is to not trade in India or assemble in India. The idea is to make in India. And when you say make in India, each and every component has to be made here. And if the powder chemistry, or let's say the basic raw material, is not available in India, then we can get the IITs of the country, or all of the research institutes to work. They all have good grant money. There is good amount of money that the DST is spending, and then they can innovate, and they can come up with the Indianized version of that particular component, which can then get industrialized. So one of the key things that is happening today is a lot of ancillary units, they do not have the tools, they don't have the money to invest in making the tools. And unless you make the tool, you will not be able to even do prototyping for things, and then go ahead. So this is an effort that we are doing with Annapurna, is that we have broken down the cooking device into about 18 different components, and we are trying to see if we can find a supplier for this component in India. If we cannot find, can we develop a supplier in India? And if we can develop the supplier in India, what is the cost we are talking about? What are the numbers we are looking at? And then go to the government for a viability gap funding of sorts. If we are able to stitch this together, see, we are looking at Annapurna, the retail sales price at about 25,000 Indian rupees. But if whatever I'm saying is possible to be done in the next 2 to 3 years, I will be able to bring down the cost to about 15,000. That's a big jump,
Okay.
25 to 15.
Sure.
And
sure.
And I think that that's my 2 bit to this conversation, that we need to be global yet local, or vocal for local, whatever people say. But and it's not about becoming inward. It's not about we are not wanting to import things. But if I were to be in the UK, I would have said the same thing, that let's make everything here, because we are looking at a target market which is very, very price sensitive, and any component not working, to import that component, a villager or a lady who's cooking on the device, for them it will become an eyesore, or a bell that they put in their neck and then roam around with it without any effect. So
okay, thank you.
Any suggestions on or questions, more than happy to answer those. But those are my 2 cents to the discussion.
Thank you. No, you set out the issues very well, I think. I think that component analysis, I know Srinivista are already doing some of that work to identify where there are particular commonly needed components, and then helping to source the suppliers. And I guess you've got that sort of stages that you need to go through as a production company, where you're looking for suppliers, and then you're looking at establish whether they can actually scale up, whether you can incentivize them. And I think, yes, clearly government has a role to play where there is unproven market demand. Okay, there's a lot there, and thank you for those suggestions. We have implicitly or explicitly been talking about India being a manufacturer increasingly, but China is clearly very much in the global context. Even if you wanted to make India 100% the manufacturer for your products, I suspect that won't happen immediately. So it's a question for companies of how to strategically work with different sources and get the best fit with what they need as things develop. So we've invited Nancy Liu to speak. She's, as I mentioned at the start, she's not personally available, but she has provided a video. And Nancy Liu is the founder of a company called China Impact Sourcing that was set up by the Shell Foundation to help companies in developing countries to source components or whole products that are positive and have an impact on the ground. So she has a good understanding of the Chinese manufacturing sector and where China is a strong provider of these as against India. So I think her comments will be very interesting and helpful in the debate. So Anshika, are you able to display that video for us?
Yeah, just give me 1 minute, 1 second.
Sure, thank you.
Hi, my name is Nancy Liu, and I'm the founder of China Impact Sourcing. We help clients in the on and off-grid markets navigate the Chinese manufacturing sector, and we primarily deal with solar modules, energy storage solutions, productive use appliances,
Is it audible?
farm equipment, EVs,
Yes, thank you.
and
Yes,
other
it's
related
fine.
components. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Nick Russo and Finovista for inviting me to speak. And even though I'm not able to join in person, I wanted to provide some tips for sourcing electric cookers from China in a cost-effective way. We've helped many companies source both finished products and components for rice cookers, pressure cookers, hot plates, etc. And some of the tips I'm going to be sharing today, they're going to be China-specific, but I do think that they could be applicable to India as well. First thing I've noticed while working with clients that are looking for electric cookers is that they've usually done a lot of R&D and have engineered a specific solution for their market, which often involves functionalities like being able to remotely control the device or collect usage data. This is all very good, except that they don't take into account the cost of customizing every component in the design process. It's actually much more cost effective to work with a supplier to redesign or repurpose existing models or components rather than starting from the ground up, especially if you're looking for DC cookers or if you're starting out with very small quantity. In China, DC cookers are not very popular because there's no domestic demand, and they're mostly catering to markets like US and Europe that are also looking for AC cookers. But China does sell DC cookers for travelers and campers. So I would suggest looking at working with those suppliers to see if there's a cost-effective way to adapt it for off-grid use. The second thing I've noticed working with Chinese electric cooking suppliers is that they're not really good at making their devices smart, meaning that if you want to incorporate IoT functionalities to collect data or to adapt it for pay-as-you-go, the cooker manufacturer is generally not equipped to do this. And even if they can handle the hardware component, they usually have to outsource the software side to a third party, which often results in something that's clunky and not very user-friendly. The supplier will also charge you a premium for this, since this is not part of their normal workflow. If you're looking to customize your cooker for smart features, I would recommend finding a third party that specializes in this. So what we do is we've helped companies add these functionalities with a charge controller through a separate supplier instead of working directly with the cooker manufacturer to develop it. The third thing to know when working with suppliers is that they're told a lot by customers that even though the first order is small, there will be a much bigger order later on. But suppliers have heard this so much that they won't usually believe it. And it becomes very difficult to negotiate for discounts. But I think a more credible way to engage a supplier when you're placing a small order is to actually include future orders or potential future orders in the first order. What I mean is, let's say if you want to place an initial order of 300 units and another order of, let's say, 1,000 down the road, it's much better to structure the deal as an order of 1,300 units with 300 to be shipped first and 1,000 to be shipped in, let's say, 6 months to a year. And even if you're not sure about your timeline or if it ends up changing and you need to make changes to your order down the road, the suppliers tend to be much more agreeable to discounts and concessions, knowing what the whole total order size will be. And generally, you don't have to pay for the entire order upfront, but only the part that's being shipped. So, although some suppliers do require a deposit for future deliveries. And the last thing I want to caution is that cheaper is not always better. To give you a cheap product, the suppliers will cut costs in a number of ways by skimping on materials, processing, quality control, or all of the above. What we do at China Impact Sourcing to get the best value for money is to look for manufacturers that are not necessarily the most well known, like Medea, for example, because they charge a premium for their brand, but to look for medium to large size suppliers in the market that use quality components and that can provide material certificates to prove that they are in fact using what they claim to be using. It also means that we will be checking downstream suppliers and raw material pricing to understand the main drivers of costs for the product. I understand most of the audience for today's panel are probably looking to procure from India. And I think India is a great market to look for DC cookers since there are a lot more options available compared to China due to domestic demand. I also think India is probably much better at integrating smart hardware and software solutions due to a bigger talent pool and experience in this area. However, I think it's still overall cheaper to get components for electric cookers in China because China has a more mature manufacturing ecosystem and they have economies of scale due to all the equipment, tech, and processes they've invested in over the years. And I think this is where China's supply chain could complement India's in creating affordable cooking solutions. India has a lead, I believe, in innovating products for developing markets, while China can provide the components necessary to build out the solution cheaply. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an either or scenario in choosing where to procure from. But in order for this type of cross-border collaboration to happen in a smooth and cost-effective way, I think there needs to be skill and coordination, which is where I think Next India can come in and potentially be a bridge and enabler. I also think that China Impact Sourcing can be a great partner to provide clarity and transparency on the supply side from China. That's all from me today. If you have any questions or any advice in this area, feel free to reach out to me at nancy@ChinaImpactSourcing.com.
Okay, I found that really helpful, really interesting. Some good points about where China has strengths in relation to manufacturing of components, but also some of the areas where India is clearly, in Nancy's view, a stronger country in terms of that integration. And I think the point that she ended on that I felt was always a kind of key point was that China's manufacturing target market is predominantly in the West. And so they're looking to produce products which are aimed at a different type of customer base. India as a manufacturer and as an exporter of goods, is extremely well placed to understand and therefore meet the needs of both domestic and developing country customers. And so that will give you a much stronger positioning. But I think it's this thing about how to combine the best of India and China, in some cases at least. And as you're all talking about the need to drive down cost for the end user, you need to be balancing those considerations of where can I get the best products at the best price at the scale I'm able to afford them. So I think that's an interesting and helpful input. I noticed that some people had trouble hearing Nancy. I apologize for that. So maybe the team at Finavista can make her video available separately, but there will be a recording of this webinar for people if they want to kind of go back and listen again. And hopefully pick up what she said. Nancy's company is available on a kind of consultancy basis to support sourcing from China, and I put her email address in the chat if you want to make contact. And I think she also talked about Finavista potentially having a role to kind of coordinate demand, and Siddhartha was making the similar point that there can be some kind of alignment around a common set of components that can then give a motivation for component suppliers to invest in the necessary production, and that should enable us to grow the sector more rapidly. I think there's an important piece of work there potentially. I feel the word roadmap is what we need here, some kind of way forward, which we're not going to get to next year. But if we think in 5-10 years' time, we want to see a lot more component manufacture in India, a lot more 100% made in India cooking device products. How does one get to that point? What kind of coordination of the industry is needed? I'll invite people to come in with comments or ask questions. There's been a number of comments in the chat, so but people can put their hands up if they'd like to raise anything. One thing I wanted to mention before I do that was we're now in discussions with an organisation called the Consumer Electronics Appliances Manufacturers Association. I don't know if they're on the call here, but they represent membership of companies that are producing various consumer electronics appliances, which includes cooking devices, but it's much broader than that, but also the kind of components, manufacturers, and indeed the raw materials sourcing of the products needed. So I'm hoping that we can build a good collaboration with them. They don't currently have very many members in the cooking space. So if this is of interest, they might be useful partners in that kind of coordination and bringing together of a more aggregated demand for components, and certainly could be helpful in facilitating a dialogue with component suppliers. Okay, well, I'll stop talking. We've heard a lot, and it's been really insightful and useful. And I think there's definitely a need for further action and to take that argument to government. Again, as Siddharth was saying, highlighting there's a need for more support for the sector if the vision of manufacturing in India is to be reached. But would people who are on the call like to put their hands up to raise a question to a specific speaker or to make a point? Or would one of our panelists like to add any further remarks? Mr. Sinha, would you like to introduce yourself briefly? You're on mute. That's it.
Now I'm should be audible. I hope so. Right. Yes. I mean, I was just referring to the presentation by Mr. Mayur, and he rightly said that the cost of the cooking process is an important factor. I mean, and the cost of cooking includes the cost of the devices as well, and that could be sometime a deterring factor in adoption of electric cooking. And he also mentioned about I mean, in fact, he suggested that by lowering the cost of it, we can do that. And his suggestion was perhaps the local manufacturing supported by PLI scheme can be beneficial in popularizing this mode of cooking. That is what I gathered from his speech. I mean, he must be aware of that PLI scheme for as far as advanced chemistry cell is concerned, which is a part of the, I mean, renewable energy ecosystem, has already been approved with a total outlay of rupees 18,100 crore, and 3 manufacturers in India have been permitted, which will, I mean, they will be getting an incentive for 4 to 6%. I mean, to lower the cost of the product to so that they are more competitive both in domestic market. And of course, the emphasis will be on greater domestic value addition and also to make them export competitive. That is the purpose of it. The same time, PLI scheme could also be adopted in the other parts of the cooking devices, which may be the stove part or induction cooktops. But for that, I mean, as far as our discussion in the government establishment has suggested that they are willing to do it, provided there is a good proposal to. And I would suggest that the manufacturer themselves could be a party to it. I mean, the information which is required. So if some that sort of information about the cost of imported components, what is the, I mean, CIF cost of a totally assembled cooking devices vis-a-vis the cost of the components which are imported. If those information are made available, certainly a case could be made before the government, because government is willing to include more item under PLI scheme. So that was a good suggestion and could be. Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, that's absolutely. We were talking to the Director General of BEE recently on my visit that Finovista organised, and there's certainly an openness, as Mr. Sinha is saying. So yeah, no, I think that's a very practical suggestion that we can take forward. Any other comments people would like to make? I see people are interested in the ATEC proposition and the ways in which your e-cook solution can be applied.
Nick,
so we've got yes.
Logistically, please ask the people who want to make a comment, they can raise the hand and then we can make them a presenter, so they can switch on the camera and video, then they can talk, and you can also read the chat. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, do that if you're keen to make a point, or if you have a question for a particular panelist. Other than that, we can wrap up. I think that we've established there's a lot to do here, and Finovista are going to be leading the work for MEX in India on this. They've established a good network of companies interested in this, and I think moving into that space where we start talking to the component manufacturers would be really valuable. Mr. Siddharth, if you want to put your hand up, I think.
Yes, Mr. Sinha mentioned about the industry coming forward and giving details on imports and what can be done. I think that's a very good suggestion. And, I would request Vimalji to kind of through Finovista, if we can put this together. I am willing to, whatever, information we have about our particular technology, I'm willing to open up all of that information, and we can prepare some kind of a proposal, keeping, all the manufacturers in the loop. I think that could be a good first step to move ahead on this.
Okay, great, thank you. I think that openness would be incredibly helpful. I realise it's a competitive environment, and there are some commercial sensitivities in all this, but thank you. I see Mr. Sanjeev Jain. Would you like to speak?
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sanjeev Jain from the Chhattisgarh Renewable Energy Development Agency. It's a state nodal agency of Ministry of New and Renewable Energy in the state of Chhattisgarh, promoting renewable energy projects in the states, and we are promoting the clean cooking systems based on the PV applications with the induction stove. And as Mr. Siddharth is expecting that these projects are, since government is promoting such type of project under the Clean Action Plan or Net Zero Activity Plan, I think this project cook stove is eligible for the assistance from the government of India under the different heads like PLI also and capital subsidy also for the promotion of the cook stove also. As a state nodal agency, we can have a pilot project in the Chhattisgarh state for a few rural beneficiaries, those who are using the conventional fuel for the cooking. And we can request to MNRE to include their in the program for the financial assistance and other assistance also. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really exciting. And we are in discussions with national MNRE, but be great to connect with you at the state level, because we do see that as being a really key. You know, India is a country with many states, and the states are actually hugely important in any implementation like this. So thank you for that comment and your offer. I'm sure Pinabi will still be in touch. Okay, there's another question for Ben about the source of electricity. Do you want to say a few words, Ben? I think we'll maybe wrap up and invite Vimal or Sheetal to comment on the way forward.
Yeah, just quickly, I think the question originally came from, sorry, I hope I pronounced this right, Corinne Boomer, around clean cooking within slum areas. We have done some work in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, around this. I think in these areas, it tends to be informal grid electrification that's quite often run by a local sort of, well, I don't know what you call it. Some may say local gangster, some may say local business entrepreneur running the electricity in that particular area, typically at 2 to 3 times the sort of general government rate. And I think that's really a key challenge, is the reliability of that electricity connection, as well as the price of per kilowatt hour that's charged into those areas is usually fairly high. So I think that's a challenge in those areas. The other thing that we've tried to look at as well is quite often there's communal cooking facilities that are shared by multiple households. Potentially with our technology, one solution we're looking at the future is effectively almost like a cooking vending machine, where you can come in, pay a few dollars through your mobile money account, use the cooker for a little limited period of time, and then change to the next person. In theory, sounds like a good idea, but it raises questions around maintenance, responsibility of the stove, etc. So I don't think it's potentially a easy solution to solve. I think there will be solutions there, but yeah, there's a few infrastructure-related challenges, particularly in slums.
Great, thank you. I'm sure there's some interest in that scenario. It's a very challenging sector. Talking about bottom of the pyramid, they certainly are the most challenging groups in many respects. Okay, Vimal or Sheetal, would you like to conclude?
Yes, Nick, before we could just conclude, can I request you to please invite Dr. Ramesh again to share his views on the challenges, because he gave his introductory remarks, but we would like to hear a little bit more in detail.
Okay. Are there particular points about his situation that you think he should expand on, Sheetal? Just
on specifically on the challenges with respect to the technology. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No, see, Sheetal, I don't think there's much of a challenge with respect to technology. The challenge is after the technology is made. You know, solar cooking is something which is best of the equipment. The most worthy component is the LPG. And unfortunately, we market LPG in the country. So I always say that it's one of the very wealthy and worthy component for any new cooking system, including the so well established induction cooktop. Because I really cite it as a point in example. Uh, uh, it can do everything that a LPG can do, but I'm sure none of us use it for reasons which are, the only way you can make people use it is to remove the LPG from their homes, and then they'll be forced to use it, and then everything will become the habit. Otherwise, it's so convenient getting up in the middle of the night, just one switch of the button, and then the lighting happens and the cooking can start. So that's the whole challenge of solar cooking or clean cooking. Apart from that, of course, there are all the other component related challenges are, I would say, temporary kind of a challenge or an chicken and egg kind of a situation. If the market is there, the component manufacturers will be more than the what you have actually envisaged. And if the component manufacturers are there, the market itself will be there. So, of course, technology wise, yes, the more the technological developments happen, the more economies of scale will happen. All these costs will come down. And that is what is, I don't know if that is the only impending factor, because Indians and everybody else in the world also are quite capable of paying much higher money for their comfort. We are paying. But for when it comes to cooking solution, we start comparing it with the again that LPG thing, which I don't know, for whatever reason is not the right way to go. So coming to the topic of today's discussion, components. Yes, as I said, electronics is a big issue. We should together solve it. And I think Nick has very rightly mentioned that this Consumer Electronic Manufacturer Association in India, they should swing into action and they should join our forum so that a lot of our pain points can be conveyed to them, and that will definitely help getting the price down.
Thank you. Yes, it is a challenge, the chicken and egg thing, as you say, because the benefit, the opportunity, given the size of India, is that domestic market scale. 1.4 billion people. One of the things that we're looking at, talked about having a roadmap, is working with the NIAS in Bangalore, the National Institute for Advanced Studies, to look at what is the policy mix that is needed to achieve scale up of electric cooking in India. And we at the MEX program have proposed an ambition of 40% of households cooking predominantly with electricity. Now, if you think of what that would mean in India, what would it mean if 40% of households were cooking with electricity? Between the different devices you've got, there would be huge demand. That would be a huge number that you'd be selling to. So the question is, if we can work with the government to agree that kind of level of ambition, then that could be an important signal to the whole sector to start scaling up operations in the way that they have seen LPG being scaled up and the government's ability to deliver at scale to reach the population. So I think I feel we're at a tipping point in India where there is a lot of interest in this, a lot of excitement. And I think we need to just bring people together and share that and give everyone a feel and a flavor and a sense of kind of how things might develop over a period of time. It's not going to happen quickly. And then hopefully we can work together and the chicken and the egg can go forward together, if that's the right metaphor. But I think I'll finish at that point. Thank you for everyone's input. There's been some good conversations in the chat. Someone's commented on the services post-installation. Yes, after sale is really important as well. I suggest we kind of need to come back to that maybe as a separate talk series topic, because I think after sales, reducing waste, maximizing the extent to which devices can maybe be reused is an important area as well. But I will thank everyone very much. It's been really good. And I look forward to further discussions with you. If you found it helpful.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Nick.
Thank you.
And I would just like to say one last thing, that Finovista is actually collating the details on the components and the challenges. Then we will be working with the industry association that Nick also mentioned just now. And we'll be getting in touch with you separately on that. And to some of the people, we've already circulated that requirement. But if anybody over here in the room would like to share more inputs with us, please feel free to write to us. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.